And this documentary will be exploring Clovis. We'll be building all of our own tools from the Clovis toolkit. Then using those tools to build our hunting implements. Then we will use everything that we made on a hunt for bison. And then explore all the different tools used to butcher the bison. So we'll start off by asking, what is Clovis? Clovis is typically best recognized by the very distinct fluting channels at the base of the projectile. And it's been extensively theorized on and debated as to what the actual flutes at the base of the point are even for. But I think ultimately the reason that Clovis has got so much attention is because of the previous Clovis first hypothesis. Clovis was originally found in Clovis, New Mexico, and was originally thought to be more of a Western style of point. And then we started to uncover more of the Younger Dryas or Clovis layers, they started to realize that there was actually significantly more Clovis in the eastern end of North America than the western end, but it actually started to show some migration patterns starting in the east with very high densities and then moving west. But with the Clovis first model, the idea was that the Clovis people were the very first people to migrate into North America. Now, of course, that Clovis first model has been proved incorrect because we have found evidence that people have been in the Americas both for thousands of years prior to Clovis. And I do truly believe that because of the Clovis first hypothesis, as well as the very recognizable diagnostics, the flute channel at the base of the point, that those two things have really made Clovis stand out and have gained a lot of attention, especially within the last 50 years. One of the other things that makes Clovis so interesting, especially to archaeologists, is that it was the one point type or blade type that was being used in association with the Younger Dryas, the transition between the Pleistocene, the Ice Age, and the Holocene, which is the time that we currently live in. So given the time frame in which they were used, also with that very recognizable flaking at the base, the flutes, that's raised a lot of questions to, was this point used to hunt megafauna? Because as we know, the megafauna went extinct right immediately after Clovis. So then that, of course, brings up the overkill hypothesis that man walked into North America and basically killed and ate all the mammoths and mastodons on their way to the southern end of North America and then to South America. And we will also certainly be able to talk about some of the megafauna extinction and the Younger Dryas and the Clovis points and their ability to take megafauna later in this documentary. And then even more recently, it's been theorized that perhaps Clovis people didn't actually hunt and kill mammoths and mastodons at all, but simply scavenged them. And that's one of the reasons as well that we're doing this project, so we can really draw some correlating lines between the plausibilities and implausibilities of early hunters killing and eating the megafauna. But to put this in a time scale, when we're looking at calendar years, you're talking about going back about 13,300 years ago to 12,800 years ago. Realistically, about 500 years is all that, out of all those thousands of years, 500 years is really all that the Clovis complex is considered its own individual point or blade type. But you'll also come to find out later that the Clovis people didn't necessarily go away. They simply started to branch off and start to make their own versions of Clovis, which are later we'll learn, Redstones and Folsom and Cumberlands, and then getting into non-fluted points. But for what people consider true Clovis, you're looking at realistically only 300 to 500 years. A very, very small window in the overall history of the people in North America. But it happened at that really important time at the Younger Dryas and the extinction of the megafauna. So if you couple that with the overkill megafauna extinction hypothesis, as well as the very recognizable flute diagnostics of the point, and then of course with the later proved wrong Clovis first hypothesis, that is really the recipe for why Clovis has got so much attention. And then of course the point here at Hunt Primitive is to not only look at as much data and facts as possible, but then to also build the hunting implements with Clovis tools, then take them hunting and then butcher animals with them, and then we can see how all the tools work, and then that can start to solve a lot of the missing puzzles on actual toolage and function and hunting and processing and plausibility that archaeology alone can't answer.
All right, good afternoon everyone. My name is Erin Benavides. I am the teacher out here at Silver River Museum, and we are so thrilled that you decided to come spend your Sunday with us. The proceeds of the ticket sale support Marion County Public Schools and the outreach that we can do with students to teach them about Florida history and environmental education and just get them outdoors, because we need kids to be outdoors. And we are so thrilled to have Ryan Gill of Hunt Primitive back with us. You are in for a treat. We are always happy to have him join us, and his presentations are always so fascinating.
This is just a small section, about 23 minutes or so, of about a 2-hour documentary that we're finishing up here very, very soon. So this is just kind of a sneak peek of it. And just so you guys know, on the documentary, I'm thinking about, as I narrate through this, doing it in real time and actually putting that on the documentary. So that's why we've got camera stuff set up. We'll just kind of blow through the whole thing, and then we can do questions and answers and stuff at the end of it. This is, again, we did an entire Clovis project where we made all the equipment that you see here is stuff that's found from the Clovis assemblage, from the Clovis toolkit. And so we made spears and the atlatl throwers, the different knives and flake tools, and some of it's interpreted because there's not a lot of wood stuff that remains, or there's really no wood stuff that remains. But all the flake tools and blade core and all of that, and then we went and did the bison hunt and then a butcher, and so all of it was with stuff from the Clovis toolkit. So we didn't use anything from different time frames, and so that's what this whole project's really about. So anyway, we'll get started with it and hopefully you enjoy it. So that's our blade core tools. That's what we would call first strike technology, single blade. Let's use for different tools. Those are all the different Clovis points we made for the whole project. So this is me setting up to do the blade core technology, basically starting on one solid rock. And it's different flint knapping than what you typically see outside, where most guys are bifacing pieces. This is removing individual blades. It's not quite as romantic to look at as bifacing tools, but the blades that are removed are just really, really sharp-edged flakes. And that whole piece can then be used later. It'll continue to core down. And that last piece you saw would make really a really nice spoke shave, actually. So these are really kind of what I call fortuitous break tools, meaning you're not necessarily making specific tools, you're just removing these blades, and some of them break a little bit different than other ones. And so each kind of has its own job that it fills fills a void in the whole toolkit. So be it scrapers or little knife edges, and we're going to see quite a bit, especially that one I'm holding right there. We're going to see quite a bit of that here as I work through. So this would be one of the types of tools that they would consider like a byrinated style of tool, which that term gets used quite a bit in archaeology, but it just really means like a chisel end. And those are perfect for gouging out things like antler or bone, make bone needles. Interestingly enough, Clovis people had the eyed needle, which would then say that they would have very sophisticated clothing. So when you see pictures of early people migrating into the Americas and they're not hardly wearing any clothes, that wouldn't be accurate at all. In a Pleistocene where it's really, really cold, you need those really warm clothes. So here's another, again, flake tools that we're using the shovel antler of a caribou and making a shaft wrench. And the shaft wrench is really important, a really important tool used to straighten out spear shafts. Because as you can see here, if we're either drying from green sticks or working with seasoned wood, we have to get it exceptionally hot to either dry the wood out and or bend it into shape. And so that shaft wrench allows us to put the leverage on the spear shaft to straighten it out, but without burning our hands. So of course, if you were wrapping that, say, with a piece of leather, you wouldn't really be able to see what you were working with, and it's going to cool it down too fast. So this way we can actually spot, heat, bend, and that tool helps a tremendous amount in straightening spear shafts. So here's another look at a spoke shave. It's really good at debarking tools, as well as this piece here that we talked about earlier. It's got one side that uses as a scraper. It's got a really steep angle on it, and they're really good. You can see the shavings coming off. And then the other side is more of that knife edge. So that's why I can use my thumb on the back, because that one's a really steep edge, it's not a knife edge. But these are really good for carving the wood. And then here you go, you can see me again using that flat side. And then here in a second you're going to see that's another like a graving tip. And I use that as a tooth planer. So you can see it's not removing flat sheets, but it's really grooving that, creating a lot of little peaks and ridges on that piece of wood. And then we flip the tool over and use the smooth planer side to really smooth and remove that wood. So you're constantly making ridges and then smoothing them out, and that allows for a really fast tool, or a really fast wood removal. And what I'm making here is what's called a lap joint. And so this is before stone drill technology, so they weren't really doing the socketed foreshafts like we see today in a lot of atlatls. So the stone drill hadn't really been invented yet. Those little byrinated points are really the precursor to drills. And so instead of using the socketed joints, the lap joints were used instead. And you'll be able to see how they're used here in just a few moments. But now we take the sharp end of one of these graver pieces, and this is called cross hatching. And the reason that we're doing this and roughing it up is because this makes a really good glue line. So when you marry this together with pine pitch glue, that is really, it gives the glue something to really get into and bite on. So this is an antler conical point, but it still is going to go on the same way with the lap joint. So we can either put on antler projectiles, or we can put spear shafts together with that same lap joint. And it's glued together with the fine pitch glue, and we can just use a stroke shave to just kind of knock that extra glue stuff off and smooth up that transition. And then here we're wrapping it with sinew, which is the tendons of really any animal, but in this case we're using the tendons from another bison that we previously killed. And if we're doing projectile points, we're typically using sinew. If we're not doing projectile points, but it's maybe in the body of the spear, instead of using a really valuable sinew, we'll use the intestines of the animal. So that gut binding, there's a lot more of it, and it's not quite as valuable. And it is still as strong, but it's not as strong within the impact. So it'll hold that spear shaft together really well, but it doesn't withstand the tip impacts. So once that's dry, then we'll coat that over with like a blend of animal grease and pine pitch, which really smooths that up. So of course, remember, wood being an extremely valuable resource. So after the hunt, when you come back to camp, you're sitting around and you're gonna have a lot of broken spears, snap tips, that kind of stuff, and then you're gonna be essentially cannibalizing all your broken pieces and then putting them all back together to make new spears. And so you can have relatively short pieces of wood, like here is one joint where this has been lap jointed together, and we come down and here's a whole another splice joint that's right here, and then we had the skinnier foreshaft end that broke off. And so that's when we're able to make a new piece, lap joint it, and again splice it in here. So you're gonna be able to continue to recycle all these different pieces of wood, but of course over a period of time, a lot of them are gonna get shorter and shorter and shorter as you have certain breaks, and you're gonna have to refit and rehaft. And then also that brings up the fact that if you're out on the tundra, if you're out in the mammoth steppe and there's very little wood resource, not only are you going to reuse as much of this wood as you possibly can, but if there's not much wood around, but there is a lot of long bones from bison antiquus or from mammoths or mastodons, what have you, those are then going to be what you're going to use as your bi-beveled rods, which is essentially what this piece is right here, except that it's made out of wood. This is essentially a bi-beveled rod that we use to join more splices, more pieces of wood together. So here's another of the flake tool technology, or the blade core rather, and then this one has a chipped edge, and you'll see it's because I can use it now as a saw. So having that little serrated edge, and we just glue it into the end of this carved out stick with pine pitch glue, and what I'm doing here is called kerfing. And instead of cutting all the way through it, we're going to really cut one side deep, flip it over, cut the other side deep. And now we can take a flake and tap it in to split that shaft. But that kerfing is really important because the kerf allows that split to follow the line that you want it to go instead of splitting off to the side. So now, if you look at the Clovis point with the really distinct fluting, if it's got really smooth, nice flutes, you can actually haft it very, very quickly with this split shaft technique. And once it's wrapped around with sinew and it's glued in, that's still a very strong joint, especially because it's being compressed when you wrap it around. That's more of an expedient method of hafting. I do believe it was utilized, especially on those really nicely fluted Clovis points. But a lot of the fluted points that are found in the archaeological record are not really nicely fluted. Or maybe they're nicely fluted on one side, maybe not at all. And in that case, we can switch over to this method of hafting, which is actually carving out the hafting groove or hafting notch. And this process takes about an hour per spear shaft. So it's not the end of the world, but it does take quite a bit longer. But it does make for a nicer fit overall because we can remove the amount of wood that we want in order to get a perfect fit. And then that's actually a flute channel flake, so off of one of our Clovis. And then we can utilize that tool as well. The channel flute is really just an extension of that blade core technology just being removed off the base of it. And then you can see here that the hafting goes all the way up to the terminations of the flute. And then that's smoothed in with what we would call a bend break style of scraper. And this is actually the back half of a Clovis preform that snapped during manufacture. But they're really good planing tools. And it's really vitally important to get a smooth transition between your projectile point and your spear shaft, because that any sort of hang-ups you have there are going to really slow penetration. So this is one that we put here. This was off of an artifact, and I hafted that up, and then I cast it basically in plastic. So now I can send copies of this to museums or universities so they can show students how those hafts look and how to marry the two together. And then of course, once they're all put together, it's glued in with pine pitch glue and then wrapped with sinew. So here's everything put together, and then we're ready to go out and hunt. Now we could talk for many hours still just on Clovis manufacture, but to really kind of give you a rundown, we'll start with the blade core technology, because remember, as we take a solid chunk of flint or chert and then start removing these blades off of it that we can use, rather than just reducing this whole big piece of rock right down into a point, you're reducing it by making flake tools along the way. So once we start getting to a point that the core becomes very small after removing these long flakes, and we're starting to run out of places to remove these tool flakes, that's when we can start making the decisions to start bifacing the piece. And by bifacing, it means removing flakes off one side and the other side, but not necessarily in that blade core fashion. So that's where you'd probably start running with something that they would call more of a wedge-shaped core as opposed to a prismatic core. But you start bifacing the piece, and this is essentially going to turn into your Clovis point preform. And if you look at the casts of artifacts of preforms, what you'll find is once they start to biface, one side is typically fluted really, really early, just like this one that I have done. And one of the reasons for that is because once you start the bifacing process, one side is typically going to have some longer overshot flaking, and then the other side is going to be a little bit more lenticular, a little bit more rounded, and that offers a great opportunity to set up yet another blade core removal, which is essentially the flute off of the preform. Then once you have this initial flute developed, this is actually what you're going to base building your Clovis point off of, a very early initial flute. Now, you may work on this piece and essentially erase this flute and then end up fluting it again. So that's something that you'll absolutely see within Clovis points, is they aren't necessarily just made and then fluted and never retouched. They might be thinned further and then fluted multiple times, removing those blade core style of flakes to use. And then as the piece gets thinner and thinner, and you've got down really to the thickness that you're looking for, and that last flute is run, that's going to be again what you're going to build your first flute side of the point on, more in a unifacial fashion. Then you can flip the point over and continue to remove material from either side, but only go into about center, which again gives it a lot more of a rounded lenticular shape. And then that's when you're going to see the other flute being removed. And sometimes that results in one really clean flute, like we would start off with here, a really beautiful clean flute that may remain in the point. And then as we flip it over, if this point was in fact finished, we might have a single good platform to remove one more really nice channel flake. Or we may have to set up multiple platforms by removing two relief flakes, a 1, a 2 on the other side, and then a third up the center. And then sometimes that fluting can happen in one shot. It may happen in 2 shots or 3, and sometimes even 4 individual small indirect percussion flutes removed off of the opposite side of the first initial flute. So there really are multiple ways to go about making Clovis, especially because there start to be a lot of variances in different types of Clovis, especially as they start to spread out. So you will see some different tools and even techniques being used, even within Clovis points made in the same area. So we gave you that really quick rundown on Clovis manufacture, just kind of as an overall blanket, but somebody to really watch and learn how to make Clovis, especially some different ways, would be to watch Marty Reuter at Flint Knapping Tips. And his information will be down in the companion files that go with this documentary. But Marty's going to be able to walk you through what some of these different flake signatures look like with the different techniques used to remove them and the stages in which you remove these flakes. While I made the majority of the Clovis points that we used for this project, especially because I wanted the practice, I wanted to manufacture these points and work through the process so I had a better understanding, we also had Marty create some of his replica Clovis points so we could use them in this test as well. So what we've got laid out on the table in front of us is a display case full of cast artifacts. So these are all plastic recreation casts of artifacts from the archaeological record. And then on the table we've got the Clovis pieces that I have made for this particular project. Some being early preforms that were broken during manufacture, some late preforms that were broken, and then also the finished pieces that we'll be using in the actual hunt. One of the things that you'll realize is when we typically talk about Clovis points, most people are trying to recreate these beautiful, more or less one-off Clovis points where they have these beautiful flute scars, one on one side, flip it over, and another beautiful flute on the other. And what we really find in the archaeological record is that these points that are truly fluted on one side, redressed and perfectly fluted on the other, having basically two beautiful perfect flutes, are truly the anomaly. They're not consistent with the average Clovis point. There are some absolutely beautiful representations of Clovis points found in the archaeological record. However, when we find these casts or pictures of these points, these are really the best of the best. And you're talking about knappers making hundreds, if not thousands, of these points, and eventually you're bound to get some that are really exquisitely knapped pieces. Your standard Clovis projectiles are typically ones that have a fairly decent flute channel on one side, and then once they're flipped over, refaced, you're typically seeing a 1, 2, 3 fluting system. I've found that indirect percussion typically works the best to create the final flutes. This piece from the Fen cache is a phenomenal example where it was fluted 1, 2 times as relief flakes, and then another one up the center, and then the point was built around these beautiful flutes, and then as the point was flipped over, finished, and then the new platform was made, another flute channel was run up this side, and if you only look at it from the one side, it's really, really beautifully fluted. Flip it over to the other, and it's not fluted nearly as well on the other side. But as with many of these beautifully fluted points that are found, a lot of them are reconstructed. So we've got multiple artifacts in this case that are really beautifully fluted on one side, and then when they are turned over, typically using a 2 relief flake and then a flute up the center, we're finding that a lot of these are broken half. So these casts that we have that have these absolutely beautiful flute scars are actually reconstructed. They found both pieces at the manufacture site. They glued them together. They cast it to show you what the point would have been. And that is really common. So when we start seeing a lot of pictures of these cast points from the archaeological record, it's easy to look at some of these and say, wow, look at that beautiful fluting. But the reality is they were snapped in half, put back together, and then cast. So these were failed points that were discarded at manufacture sites. So did some of these points actually survive, or did they break them all? Well, certainly we have some. We have some beautiful points that did survive, that are beautifully fluted on either side. But again, these are the anomaly. The most common fluted points that we're finding are ones that either fluted on one side, built around an early flute on a preform, or most commonly, they're simply rough fluted on one side where it looks pretty decent. They flip it over, work the point out, run a couple indirect flakes, and it's finished out. And what it really is it's basal thinning more than anything. So when you are looking at casts of artifacts from known mammoth and mastodon kill sites, we're typically not seeing these exquisitely fluted points. Not as the standard. A lot of them have a little bit of fluting on one side, no fluting on the other, or some really nice fluting on one side with nothing on the other, or some indirect flutes. And just like these points here from the Kimswick site, they both have very, very modest fluting, yet these are perfect killing points for killing proboscideans. Alright, so in my hand I'm holding a collection of casts from different proboscidean sites, either mammoth or mastodon kill sites. So these came from specific kill sites, not just within the Clovis complex. But what you're going to see throughout all of these is a constant theme that the points that they're using to hunt proboscideans are really quite small. Let's look at this one from the Dumbo site. And if you really look at the size of this point, it's really the size of my pinky finger overall. And then if we get into Lang-Ferguson, again, look how small that one is. We've got the Colby. There's one here. And the Kimswick Mastodon site. This one's a little bit longer, but overall it's still pretty narrow and very sharp distal ends. Probably the largest one that comes from an actual mammoth kill site is going to be the larger projectile point, which could have been used as a knife blade, but it probably was a projectile point used to throw at a mammoth from Colby, Wyoming. And even that, it's not huge overall compared to a lot of the really big points that we associate with hunting megafauna. But the reality is, people think that megafauna was hunted with these great big spear points, when the kill sites actually show us that they're using almost exclusively really small projectiles just like this one. And how could that possibly be? The bigger the animal, the bigger projectile needed, right? That's not true, because this is going to have so much kinetic friction. There's going to be so much resistance of this trying to drive through that woolly hair and that really thick hide. It's got so much surface area, it's just not going to penetrate. But this little guy right here, really small, very light surface area, put on a very tiny, thin foreshaft, meant not to go completely through the animal, but to penetrate only 6 to 12 inches, get on one side and pop a lung. Guys on the other side are throwing on this side, pop the other lung. You're putting 10, 15, 20 spears into this animal, and then you're going to put it down. And you're not doing it with these big giant points. You're not running up to it, jabbing it to death with these things, because that's a good way to get yourself killed by the huge trunk and the tusks of this animal. You're going to step back using the atlatl that has been around for tens of thousands of years earlier than Clovis people in Europe and Asia. It was brought to the Americas with the people that migrated to the Americas, and they absolutely knew that throwing these little tiny projectile points along with osseous, bone, ivory projectile like conical and even flat ground points for penetration, these little guys right here, those are your killing points. All right, guys, I'm really excited that you guys are here. Thank you all for coming. I know it comes at a great expense to many. There's a lot of months of work that come into this, building the tools, testing stuff out, me telling you that everything's junk and to start over and to do it again. So, I mean, I really appreciate everything you guys have put into this. Much to the dismay of the armchair quarterbacks that really like to say that this is just, oh, it's shooting fish in a barrel, or these are tame, fluffy cows. Remember that just because we have to perform these tests and these hunts in a ranch setting because of legal reasons, and obviously bison just aren't free ranging, don't forget that these absolutely are wild animals. The more that we harass them, the spookier that they are going to get. So the very first opportunities that we have with these animals are our best ones. If you push them and get wild, they will get wild, and when they start picking up the pace, they won't stop. The guys that have done hunts previously will tell you absolutely, when you first see them, that's really your best opportunity. You can get in, you can actually get 40, 50 yards from them, and then they start getting nervous, and then they turn, and then most of the time, and we hope this is the case, they work away. This isn't a wave your hands in the air and start shouting, we need to make it move, because you're going to spook them up really fast. What you do is you step out, they look at you, and you let them get a little bit nervous on their own, and if they're not nervous enough, you get another step. And you keep moving until they start to turn and start going that direction. If you push them too hard the first time or two, they're going to start running. When they start running, now we got problems. They can get into some very, very thick stuff that it's going to be almost impossible to get them out of, but also extremely dangerous. So remember, they are spooky. Our first attempts we have to take very seriously. No excessively long shots. Keep them in, put yourself in the right position. If you've got the opportunity, you need to take the opportunity. If you don't have the right opportunity, don't force it. Wait for the right opportunity. We have one opportunity to put a spear in this thing. that's a lethal hit. After that, we can put more in it, and hopefully we can for the extra data. But if this thing gets speared in the leg, or in the shoulder blade, or in the high in the neck, or in the hump, or you hit it in the face, or in the ass, we got a problem. Because it's not going to stand there and let us do this again. So not only are they wild, and they're going to be spooky, you need to remember safety is a big concern. These animals have the propensity to kill you. They will if they are cornered. And if you harass them enough, the body language you need to look at is that it's going to lock out, and its head's going to start to go down, and that tail is going to go up, and it's going to hook. And that means it's pissed. And they can, absolutely, and I was one of the first ones to say not a big deal. I'm a pretty flighty guy. I can get out of a situation, and it was a couple years ago that I about got trampled. And luckily, it fell down in the mud. We both fell down, and I thought, that's it. This is how I go. I was able to get up faster and get out of the way. They absolutely will kill you if you put yourself in the situation to do that. And that's exactly why y'all signed the waiver today as well. So keep that in mind. Safety is paramount. Don't be a hero. However, if they start rolling to that thick side, the swamp side, and there's already a spear in it, that's an opportunity at that point that I want you to at least try at that point to redirect it and scare it back. And that is why you guys are chosen, because this is a tribe effort. It is not an individual effort. So I can trust that you guys are going to do that. But also, when a spear's in this animal and it's go time, there's no asking permission. So whether it's in the lungs and this thing's on its knees going down, put a spear in the thing. Let's get some data. We'll put it down as fast as we can. Doesn't matter what people on the internet say about it, okay? We're here to put an animal down, to get the data, and the last thing you want is to have one that's sitting there that could be speared more, and then people say, well, that's horrible, you had to put a lot of spears in it. That's specifically what we're after, trying to do here. Get it down as fast as possible, but as safe as possible. So keep it out of the bad stuff. Think about your shots, and when it is your turn to throw with the confidence that you're not just hitting the bison. Visualize that spear going all the way through. I want you to visualize the fletchings going completely through. Do we know how far these are going to penetrate? They're huge spears. I have no idea. I think they're going to do very good. But there's a certain visualization that if you just imagine you're trying to do that quick snap and hit that bison, that's when you mess up. Remember, wait till you have the shot, and then it's starting to train. It's nice and slow. Follow through. Always follow through, just the way you would on a target, and just visualize that spear gliding all the way through it. Watch that spear go all the way to that one mark you're trying to hit. Remember, you're not trying to hit the bison. You're picking out a little tuft of hair, the smallest point that you can. You're trying to hit that point, and you're going to focus the whole way through the throw until that spear hits. That's what you're after. Remember the fundamentals, because when the animal's in front of you, it's very, very easy to forget that. I know from experience. I probably messed up more shots than everybody in this entire room. If you mess up a shot, it's not the end of the world. But remember, the first shot's the most important shot, no matter who gets it. After that, be smart. Don't get killed. Don't put a cameraman in jeopardy, but get the job done. Don't be scared to get up there and get after it. But if you do have an issue and you think it's a really unsafe situation, don't. Now, also, I wish that I may still pull this up and I will show you guys on film what to watch for. If that animal is looking at you, don't throw at it. Because if you go back and you watch the very first one that I speared, all the bison were standing there, and I got lucky. And that's because when I threw, the bison that I was throwing at, just before I threw, turned away to look at these other bison that were being goofy behind it. It never saw the spear going. But if you slow it down and freeze frame this, you will see that before that spear ever gets there, the bison that I killed is going like this. All the other ones around it are like this. They're already gone. The only other one that is still standing there is another bison that was looking this way. So if that thing's out there at 15, 20 yards and it's looking at you and it knows you are there, if you throw at it, there's a very good chance it is not going to be there by the time the spear gets there. Okay? Remember, these things aren't crazy fast. So we're setting up in positions where we're going to push these bison and they're going to walk by. And the idea is you don't want them to know you're there. So if you actually get pretty close and they're staring at you like 20 yards and I'm going to throw it, if you throw it, there's a very good chance it's not going to be there. And it's not so much of a big deal if you miss, but if it turns and you hit it in the leg or in the face or in the ass or something like that, now that's when we have a problem. Everybody thinks that they're just going to stand there the entire time you throw something at them, and really they're not. Now, once there's a spear in it, you do what you got to do. In this situation where if we're talking, if we get them in the pasture, maybe like we did last time, it's hanging out, it's locked out, it's hurting, it's losing blood. Best thing to do at that point is whoever the bison's looking at, that person should be walking back and forth. Should be basically keeping that bison's attention, be unselfish in this situation. No matter how bad you want to throw at it, don't scare it, but just keep its attention. Let people from the back come in and from the sides, and it may change its position. And I think what it is this is a game of it's here, and now its attention's over here. It caught movement, now it's looking. Now it's over here. This person can move in. That's when you're going to see that somebody else is going to be able to come in really quick. You see your opportunity, move in, get in there, get in position. As soon as this thing starts to turn and it's coming, give it one. And then get out of the way. Okay? Don't get crazy close and don't second guess it. Get it in and get out of the way. Okay? And then as soon as you hit it, there's a very good chance it's going to run and do some other stuff. Okay? And then it's going to be that same game kind of over and over and over. So everything should go smooth, but it is a serious situation. We're going to go have a good time, but it can go bad quickly, especially at the ranges that we're talking about getting. Anywhere from 10 to 20 yards on these things. You get inside 15 yards with a bison that's got a spear in it, and that's a danger zone.
through.
Carley, my spear's back there, grab it.
Got it.
We got a backside. Hey, we got a backside. Somebody behind him. Okay. Go, Tristan. This is you. Ho. Finish him, Ryan. That damn thing started running. Switch. Sam, get around that corner. Get up the road. Switch. Run. Sam, get around that corner. Get up the road. Joe, you need to run. He's looking at me. Now take that. Get it. Look out. Now take that. Get it. Look out. Get my eye spirit. Come on, tell me you got that one. I put it right behind his ear.
Got it.
Come on, Joe. Tell me you got that one. I put it right behind his ear. Get him, Joe. Spirit thing. Spirit. Try not to get run. Get up there, guys. Joe, get it. Come on, Joe. Let's go. Come on, Joe. Let's go. Oh, shit. No, no, where we don't want him. I'm trying. Get around him. He's done. He's done. He'll later be done.
I grabbed a spear up off the ground that didn't have a point on it. I just
Great job, guys.
off him, man.
All right, we definitely have some really important recap moments that we need to go back through on this hunt so we can walk you guys through and kind of explain what's going on within the hunt. As you'll be able to see with the first initial throw that Sam had, it was quite a distance that he's throwing these really large spears. And we kind of talked about this previously as well, that if the bison can see a throw, they're going to turn and run. And you do see that I'm sure his spear was probably really on target with his throw. And as that animal turned, it definitely hit it back and hit it into the abdominal cavity. And at that point, it really turned into try to get around these animals and keep them from going into the really thick swamp. So we had some of the hunters that really pursued right behind it, like Jason and Tristan, and then Joe, myself, and Sam. We would run the long way around to try to get in front of it. I was fortunate enough to be the one that was close enough that had to actually run the longest way around, so there's actually less footage of me running and chasing because I'm going all the way around to try to stop this thing, and then you finally see me, okay, now I'm in the picture, and it's because it ran all the way to the swamp, and I was there and able to really put my hands up, stop it. And right before this moment is when you saw that it was coming around that big patch of brush, and Jason was able to back up. He didn't realize that it was that close to the brush coming through. He saw it, leaned out, saw that it was coming, and then he backed up, and as it came through, he put the second really good hit on it. So he ended up hitting right on its right side lung.
Hit!
And so with that good lung hit, that's when it ran out. And then by this time, it's already tired because it's been chased and it's also been hurt from the spear in its abdominal cavity. But now it's got one in the thoracic cavity, and now it's really hurting. So that's why it runs out in the pasture and it goes ahead and stops. And then that's when Sam has an opportunity to get in close. He unfortunately missed. Tristan put another one in it, kind of low in the throat area. And then again, I'm on the hunt to kind of keep it out of the swamp and keep trying to push it back into realistically the field of play so it doesn't get into the nasty stuff. But once Jason put that one good spear right in at least the one lung, so it didn't get the full penetration that we were looking for, but it got one lung, and that really hurt it. That opened the door then for us. It slowed it down. Then we were able to come in and start putting more in it. But as you'll watch throughout this hunt, all the spears that hit in the vital organs, the lung or the liver, anything like that, all happened on the animal's right side. And so we never had an opportunity to deflate the left side lung, even though, and I already know somebody's going to say, well, a bison's lungs are different, they connect, and that's very true. But we've shown that even with the bow and arrow bison hunt we did last year. Yes, the animal will die eventually, however, it can live a very long time with just one lung deflated. So it was speared multiple times, and that lung on the right side was without a doubt hemorrhaging and deflated, but it still had the left side lung. And once it caught about 2 more spears on that side, that's what really made it run around that corner. We kind of thought we lost it to the swamp, and it was within 100 yards of getting into the really thick stuff. It couldn't make it. It laid down. It collapsed from exhaustion. And after it went and laid down, Joe and Tristan came in. They put 2 more in it really to finish it off, but I don't think anybody was thinking at the time that all the vital hits had been on the animal's right side, so they put more spears in that, again, were struggling to penetrate, put spears in on that side, and really it needed more spears on the left side, so that's why I came in. I still had 2 spears left over. I went all the way back and picked up spears that I left on the ground all the way where we started. So I came back And then I put 2 in there, not only for the data collection and penetration, but also to make sure we deflate that left side lung so really that animal could expire as soon as possible. So it might look like we're jumping in and really just pummeling it hard once it's already down, but it was for a specific reason. It definitely had the energy to get back up, as you saw after Tristan's second spear with it laying down, it tried to get back up. That's why I came in to make sure we deflate those lungs on its left side to really put that animal down as fast as possible. But the real important thing about this is remember that we're using way oversized spears. Going into this for a bison hunt, I was very specific, to tell everybody that these spears are way oversized. They're not efficient for bison hunting. This was a theory that we were running with the possibility of hunting mammoths, which we're looking for as much kinetic energy and as much momentum as possible. And what ended up happening was we had to run this whole idea to ground and really had to even prove my theory wrong, which was to simply build the biggest spears we could possibly build and throw, not necessarily for accuracy, but for power. So the idea, of course, was the bigger the spear, the more kinetic energy and the more momentum. And some of these spears were the same length and even weight of a modern day Olympic javelin. Plus, we had the mechanical advantage of throwing them with the atlatls. So I really expected going into this that we were going to have massive penetration. That was actually the goal, was to go into this project, spear a bison, maybe not get super accurate throws, but the ones we hit, we expected massive penetration, equal spear out both sides of the animals, or even pass-throughs with the fletching getting caught up in the animal. And I think all of us really expected that result to some degree. Because with the very first bison that I ever speared with an atlatl, I was using cane spears that were a third of the weight of these hardwood spears and got really good penetration. Went in one side of the rib cage, out the other side of the rib cage, and the points were both found. 2 points, 2 shots were both found in the opposite meat of the shoulder. So we had full. One was through the heart, and then one was through both lungs, and it was only 2 shots, and the animal went down very, very quickly. So we really assumed going into this with these massive spears that we've been training now for a year, throwing just these massive spears as hard as we can, we really thought that we were going to see massive penetration compared to those first spears that I threw a couple years ago and got really good penetration. But funny enough, exactly how I wrote about in my book, The Secrets and Science of Primitive Archery, where we ran aground a lot of these tests comparing kinetic energy and momentum, but then also bringing in friction, kinetic friction, into the variables that need to be considered. And really what we found in this hunt was not only were these spears really not efficient enough for good, accurate throws, but they also had so much oscillation because of their giant size, but then they also had a lot of drop off in elevation in the throw, made them very hard to throw accurately, and they had a tremendous amount of kinetic friction compared to very thin tapered foreshafts on smaller spears. So I feel like we had a really good idea in taking this all the way on one side of the spectrum, saying what are the heaviest spears we could possibly throw. Essentially, modern day javelins being thrown off of atlatls for the most velocity possible. And it was a really good idea to run to ground, but as you can see in here, penetration was absolutely an issue. There's really simply too much friction with these giant javelin-sized spear shafts, despite having really, really finely barrel-tapered front ends, and then these points that are contextually sized really just struggle to cut a large enough wound channel for that large spear to slide in behind it. Also keeping in mind that these Clovis points really don't have the very steep edge geometry that later transitional paleo or archaic points do, such as Dalton's or Baldwin style of points that are very, very sharp at the tip. They're not rounded at all, so that, again, decreases kinetic friction and promotes deeper penetration. So even though we were able to essentially prove that, my initial idea of getting these massive spears and throwing it and we're going to see this huge penetration, we proved that wrong. And as much as I wanted that to work, bad performance is still good data. So we're still able to look at this and say, now we absolutely know that we go into this again, there's no way we're going to throw these giant oversized spears that have a tremendous amount of oscillation. They're really hard to put on target accurately, and especially when you're exhausted from running as far as we were. But I am very happy that we did kind of run that aground, because now we can pull all of this back in and we can say we already explored that. Let's go back to what worked really well prior to this. There's two, the maneuverability, and you can't really get a good solid throw on it because half the time you're running around moving, plus you're also exhausted because you just got done running, and it's a big spear to hoof. And so when you're dialed in on a target, it's a lot, you can be a lot more accurate with it. But this thing's moving. Like the one shot that I had, it walked out and it was perfect, and as I go to throw it started running, and then it hit it way up here. It's like, so this is just what happens. But the same exact way that everybody just kept cutting it, trying to keep it out of this thick stuff, and it was right here, it almost made it in and it didn't. But everybody just kept, when somebody was exhausted, there was always somebody else to pick up the pace and go a different direction, so somebody else could catch their breath, walk, get up a little bit closer to it, and other people could constantly be swinging around. Well, so
I think once that first spear got in, then people weren't afraid to communicate. We were yelling, screaming, move, switch, and I think that was instrumental in letting people know that we're behind cover, which way it was heading. That way it's like it's coming your way. So then guys postured up with a spear, and they were prepared like you were when it came.
Perfectly.
Yeah, I mean that communication was huge.
But it doesn't walk out, and it's like as soon as it sees you, it starts to run. So the opportunities then to get those shots on target are really tough. And I did expect that we would see a lot bigger, deeper penetration with these big spears, because the one that I speared with the cane spears got really equal penetration. But I think it is kind of a kinetic friction issue where these things have a lot more friction than those tiny little spear shafts, like in 4 shafts using on the first one. But I mean, it's hard to judge with it. This is one of those ones where we say, well, can it take a mammoth with the penetration that we're seeing here? And I'm sure it can. You just treat it this way, but it's probably going to have about 3 times as many spears in it.
Absolutely.
And you might be chasing it for miles over Pleistocene tundra, realistically, where you're not so much worried about it getting into thick stuff because there is none. You're just constantly catching back up and trying to lob them at distance. So as far as penetration stuff, I think we have a little bit more work to do overall to figure out really the most efficient set possible. And then we'll know a little bit more too as we look at some of the penetration on this, but there's a lot going on in a short amount of time. What do you think that was, like 15 minutes all said, maybe 20?
Yeah,
I don't know. 15,
it was so
idea?
fast. There was like no time. It was like it's like time stood still.
Yeah.
Because it was just, you were like so caught up in the moment, there was no time.
Yeah.
It was just keeping eyes on the bison and keeping people.
It just felt like a wolf pack, man.
I think
awesome.
truly volume of fire. In lack of penetration, volume of fire and quantity of spears put in the animal in those strategic locations, and keeping the animal moving. He's wore out.
Oh yeah.
We kept him moving.
Yep.
So we're raising that anxiety and putting spears in him at the same time. I mean, he was exhausted when he got here.
Oh yeah.
He was exhausted being chased and being thrown at. So
I think that's some good hits.
Yeah,
on
and I think
too,
that's a key part that's underappreciated is the push.
Yep.
If you got the quantity of people to push and to cordon off this animal, that's going to help kill the animal. The reason you don't chase a deer is you'll never catch it. It's just you and the deer.
And you could never catch it if it was healthy.
You got the people. You got
spears in
exactly.
it.
And every time he turns, he catches another spear. So it's just raising that heightened anxiety and heightened that level of fatigue.
Yeah. It worked out amazing.
I think that was a key part of the hunt was the tribe.
So we absolutely had the right group of guys for this one. Nothing was mixed match, nothing was just put into place, there was nothing forced. Everybody wanted so bad to be here. They built all their spears. everybody put themselves in a position that they needed to be in to make this happen. I've never heard a single word of cynicism from anybody in this whole group. It's amazing. There was no doubts. It was straight work. And these guys showed up and did it. And we're out of spears now, but is anybody interested in spearing another one?
Oh yeah. give me 10 minutes to catch my breath.
I think that was a total hunt time was a little less than an hour.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Wow. Just wolf pack.
That's from the time we walked.
Yeah.
We loaded and got out here. So like total hunt time, like actual on the ground, on the animal.
From spear in.
Yeah.
It was probably 15 maybe 20 tops. Tops.
Yep.
So that's a testament to
this group.
Teamwork, dedication, all the hunt primitive tribe values, man. That's where it all came together, man.
We were able to work, I think, a lot of that through with our communication stuff last night as well. So I don't think anybody had any doubts about what they were doing. It was straight up get a shot.
Yep.
I feel like we had clear communication ahead of time, so we knew exactly what to do when we got on the field.
Everything we do as a tribe, and that even includes making a fire. All of these guys here, they have the individual capability of making a hand drill friction fire all by themselves, but by working together, nobody is depleting their individual energy reserves, and they're also not running the risk of messing up their hands and getting blisters, because we have this entire bison now to break up. So by coming together and working this fire out very systematically, it's just a really smart choice moving forward, and that's another aspect of real teamwork and cooperation.
Hold there. All right. Sam?
Got it.
Let's let that build.
Or antler pin.
Antler pin, yeah. So,
and that we'll be able to come back to that and see what it penetrated up through, but the half, you can just see the lap joint exposed at the skin, right?
yeah, you can see the lap joint exposed to the skin. The cavity is almost hidden by the hair, so you really can't ascertain a track. So once we get this, get the head, get the hide skin back, and able to kind of open this up, we'll be able to figure out the depth of penetration on the actual antler tine.
Right, and that wasn't an intentional hit. You were aiming and it whirled.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So this,
I mean, just like any of these.
This was aiming for kind of in this area here. The bison spun, so as it turned and I threw, it ended up here as opposed to here.
And that's locked in. But like, can you grab that and wiggle it? Does it move, or is it rock solid?
No, I can move it. I don't know if I can pull it out, but I can move it. It's deep in there.
It's pretty. Okay.
I can just feel the tip of the lap.
All right, we'll find out more out of that as we go, and we can take that. All right, this spear right here.
Yep.
Do we have any idea where? That's not in very far. So what's up with this one? Any idea? What number is it?
I don't know. There's no number on it.
Yeah, there is. There's got to be.
No, I'm sorry. Number 10.
Okay.
This is number 10.
Plus the point, which is hard to gauge, but that was only 4 inches.
4 inches. Yep.
Plus point. Okay. Shoulder.
And I can feel the point.
Okay, you can. Is it lodged or is it loose?
Wait a minute. It's lodged in the shoulder.
It's lodged in there?
Yeah, it feels like it's lodged in the shoulder.
Okay.
Point is detached, and our depth of penetration to the top of the haft where the point would be 8 inches. And what may have stopped that one was the spear that was thrown before it.
Okay.
Because they were both, these holes here are very much close together. So as that spear penetrated, it may have glanced off the other spear, which actually slowed it down. Before we get to number 8, there's a point in here.
We'll get it out.
No, I was just talking about actually there was actually a spear here where depth of penetration unknown, very good bleed here, but when we get this open, we'll be able to figure out exactly how deep that point went and if it made contact with any bone on the way in. From the blood, it looks like it actually did some substantial damage, and it may have missed the ribs altogether. But we'll find out on that one. The spear is actually missing, but there's a point in there.
Whoever wants to get in and help.
You guys
See how it rolls? Easy.
Okay, now grab a bottom,
So grab that leg and stick it out.
M2.
Mm-hmm.
M2.
That's starting from the front.
Here.
Okay, that was when it was laying down. Okay. Get some penetration. Ooh, nothing hardly.
Looks like the point snapped.
Oh, I clacked that thing hard. Okay.
Yeah, so point snapped at the base.
All right, measure from the break down to the penetration, which is significantly less than we expected.
7.5,
Okay.
almost 8, 7 3/4.
And then what's the number on that one?
M1.
M1. Okay. That was a good penetrator there.
Yep. I think the point just broke as I was taking it out. Another
That's
snap.
fine. Yep. Just measure from that
Hold that.
break.
17 inches.
I think the point came off on the
It
rib.
did. I saw it. Yeah, I saw it like. Right.
Yep.
So it would be.
To the haft. Yep.
Yep. So it'd be 16 plus point.
And then give me an idea. It's right in the flank, right?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
it's coming here, and it's right up to the guts.
That's good. Do me a favor while I'm writing this data. Anything, all the other spears that are left, tell me the number and let me know if it looks like it's never been thrown or if it was a miss. So just call those out.
Pressure. Oh, that's a fire hardened wood tip.
That's right into the rib.
Exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, record this shit on a fire hardened wood steel, and everybody's like, well, you don't need points or whatever. That's the reason they either use bone, ivory, or then stone. It doesn't hardened and sharpened. I mean, really, to a needle sharp tip, absolutely denied. That's what happens with wood. So everybody's like, oh, they just ran around with sharpened sticks. I've done it on a deer and bounced it off the same way it happened there. This is a big outlaw set. Try it again and see what happens. Maybe get in there. Maybe you hit a rib. I don't know.
Did it mash at all?
Yeah, it did. I think I hit a rib.
Yeah.
So right now, before we butcher this bison, we're going to run a few test shots with fire-hardened, sharpened wood-tipped spears, because the question always arises to say, well, you know, you don't really need any of those points. All you need to do is hit it with sharpened sticks, and that'll be sufficient enough to kill it. And when people look at conical, ivory, or antler, or bone points, they again say, well, why would you go through all the trouble of making this if you can just sharpen the end of your piece of wood and then you fire harden it and then you put enough spears in it, it'll kill it. And so that's exactly what we're doing right here. That's the best one. Try it one more time. The butt, about 8 inches.
Yep.
But not be overwhelming.
And then there's no laceration at all. Just poking a hole.
Wish we'd have had a good bone point put in. Somebody messed up and hit it in the leg.
Yeah, the ball is pretty good.
Yeah. There's that.
Is that hickory or?
Now you gotta try it one more time.
I think if it was hickory, it would have went.
And as you can see, the wood tips, they're really just too soft. Even when fire hardened and really sharpened the best that we can, they roll the tip upon impact and they just are not sufficient for real penetration. All right, that's three.
That was a good one.
It's done. Show the camera. Get up close. Let them see the tip of that. Then we're gonna get going.
What? Oh yeah.
Different tools from the Clovis assemblage. So there's a whole bunch of different kind of stuff and different possible ways that this stuff can be hafted. So we're going to kind of run through a whole bunch of it. Any flakes that you use and like you used it for a while, you made a split when it got dull, we need to make a pile of this is what was used. Don't just put it back in the box. And then, so whoever comes up with that, we can do it over by the fire. Just make a pile. This was used. It was good. I'll lay something down, whatever. And then the ones that you're like, this thing is absolutely awful. I tried it for like 3 seconds and it sucks. Put it in a different pile. Whole bunch of different blade core flakes to run through. So basically, even though we've got a nice plastic bin, pick what you want. And then we're going to start the initial incision with the flakes because the hafted flake tools that we have are they're going to dull up too quick because from past experience, these blades are really sharp right until they aren't. So the edge depletes really, really fast. They're very sharp to start with, but you don't get a lot of work done. So we're going to do this side with some blade core type stuff and then progressively change through tools. Everybody's going to try some different stuff. We don't want to waste a ton of time, but I want everybody to know what all the tools feel like. And we're going to test some different ones. And then once we get to most of this side is done or all of this side is done, we flip it over. Everybody's going to choose whatever tool they wanted to choose. And then that's going to really tell the story of what's efficient and what's not. Because I can tell you right now, I'd be very surprised if people just pick these blade core flakes as is in hand and decide to use this on this whole bison. All right, so initial incision stuff, because we're gonna save this so you can put that in your house. Sam was the one that made the first hit that would be lethal. That would have absolutely killed it. Hitting it there, even though it was back, still would have killed it. He's the one that put the first solid strike in it. So he's decided he would like to have the head mount, and I think that's a fantastic choice. So that's why when people have asked in the previous videos why I cut it here and not keep the whole hide, they weren't doing head mounts. But this is something, the head mounts to us are it's a great memory that you can show your family and your friends, and every time that you sit with your family and you look up at that thing, you're going to remember these moments. And that's what I do with mine. So regardless of what anybody thinks about it, that's what we're doing. I don't really care. So that's why we split the hide like you've seen previously. So you on these, because you want to have plenty, you're actually going to go like right about here. Okay. So you don't want to come up too tight. You're going to want to come down. There's plenty of skin to wrap around, and then we've got the back half that can be used for other stuff. Okay. So go ahead and start it kind of. You definitely don't want to cut short because that shoulder mount's going to stop here. You got to get like straight. Okay. So anywhere you get started, let Sam do it, because we're doing that.
You just go all in or a circle, all the way back.
Once they get this around, we'll start working on the back end, and I'll hold. We did it last
I've been getting some killer footage.
Leg up, yep. And so I'll
noticing the blades
I'm gonna slide that out of the
full of hair, you know, so you gotta pull it off.
Good.
Every now and then.
Anything that you use and it depletes and you like it, here's the lid. Just set it right on top of that lid, okay? That way we know where they're at when we're done with this stage. I want to be able to look at these tools later on. And so now take that and run it to about here. And then I'll continue with this.
Open it this way some for Sam.
Okay.
All right. Sam, come on this side.
I'm reaching too far on.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna. That way, I'm not in your way, but I can still pull.
Yeah,
and I
what you can do is
and pull down.
start splitting like from right here go ahead and start working that belly up.
Okay.
And then Joe will probably, or even Kayce at this point, it's a great time too. If you start splitting that belly with this, just don't cut the gut punch if you can.
Right.
And then
I'll hold
she'll
the
be able
leg.
to pull that
Yeah,
leg
okay.
back.
Yeah.
So if you cut her back to about here, and then we'll cut this one just like you're doing. Like
I'm gonna need a new blade soon.
Come all the way back here to
It's crazy because people think it's
and then add up and do that both sides. So off the shoulder separate.
Yeah. Starting to get dull.
But
Here,
there's
grab
also
another one
a
that's
good
right
piece of
behind you.
meat right here. So yeah, you hold that right there. I'm gonna get up under that meat. We're just we'll take the shoulder right off.
A little?
Yeah.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
Yeah. How you feeling about these blade tools?
I like them if they're big enough
Jason's
to actually
looking
hold in
like
your
he's
hand.
having no
So if
problem
they're
with
too
that,
small, you
man.
can't grip them very
For
well.
real, bro. You're like
I mean, they work.
getting in
They
there.
do work, yeah.
Jimmy, we chuck that on that lid.
They don't last forever, obviously, but
Don't grab one with two sides.
We'll pop that one in the use pile
Yeah.
somewhere.
you okay, Mike? Which direction, Fred?
Ready?
I think we're pulling up this way, yeah.
This is the last piece right here.
We're trying to get her all the way down.
We got 4 different hafted flake tools. So now this gives us leverage. Hafted flake tools here. So we see how fast they relatively deplete. This is one of those that we may, if people like these, and we finish this side out, we can sharpen these, continue on. But we have 2 that are pinch, which they're pretty tight, but they're not secured. These ones, there's no pinch, but they're glued in. So they can't hold a ridiculous amount of pressure, but they have good sharp edges on handles. And so I don't care who gets what, switch into some of those, try something, whoever's working.
You need that in a minute.
And then I'll work on taking meat off the shoulder.
Yeah,
You want me to pull that this way?
And I just want you guys to try them, and then we'll talk about them later.
Oops, sorry.
Already a big difference, right? Because you got a handle on it.
Mine just popped off.
I'm just putting tension on the hide so we can keep it.
So I'm going to pull the meat off this shoulder blade and try to kind of separate that ulna out. So yeah, when you get to the point of Jason knows, he'll tell you we're going to separate muscle groups because it's actually easier than just carving through all the muscle.
My blade popped out.
Initial reactions on the guys using the hafted stuff.
Yeah, obviously, the handle separate, move your hand away from that. So don't worry about cutting yourself, so that way you can actually focus on actually.
Yeah, you follow me.
Yeah, I like that a lot more already.
Middle.
Yeah, you
guys might have something
pull
better.
up this, Jim.
Yep.
Damn.
She cut
Carley
herself.
got cut. Carley got cut.
I did too. Those little flakes, man.
There's a gauze in the back
Had
of the
two
Ranger.
sharp sides on it.
She got her finger like the kind of middle of the tip.
That's the danger with flake tools too.
Yeah, they're so freaking
Once they
sharp,
get slick and you slide, it's done.
The hafting really seems to help quite a bit.
How far are we taking this down?
Yeah, now I'm getting hungry looking at all this meat and stuff. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Did I get you?
No, you're good.
We're knocking the meat off this shoulder blade.
Okay.
So this way we can have bone tool, but we're also like you could just haul this whole quarter and run off with it.
Yeah.
But realistically, you're going to be taking the meat off the bone anyway.
Okay.
So that's just what we're just deboning everything as we go. This is a pretty good sized cow.
Is that what, medium?
She's probably about 900 or so pounds if I had to take a guess.
Yeah.
Just off the fly.
More here.
Again.
Good, that's what I like to hear.
It's but a flesh wound.
What are you gonna do? Bleed on me? So she got a cut on her tip of her middle finger. Yeah, she got it right on the tip of her. So it kind of cut across the middle of it, which is
right on the
good.
guts for this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels good. Got it up.
All right, so yeah, she used the pinch and she got hurt on the pinch one. So that's an issue with that. The one that I'm using is actually holding together pretty darn good.
I had to reposition mine.
Can we get, are we able, Ryan, yet to transition into something we can clean hair out of easier? Because it's clogging the flake.
But he should transition into one of these.
Yeah, I haven't had a
Might be a
handle
little
yet.
special.
Use that. Use that one. That's pretty good. Because I got this stuff,
Got
so
some life to it, I think.
I got the meat off this one, the shoulder blade. I'll go ahead and take this so we can keep bones and hooves and whatever else we want, but I got the main bulk off of that. All right, so one of the theories on this with Clovis stuff that they would be using as like a multi-tool, their foreshafts, they could pull them out of their spears and then use them as knives. And so that's something that it's definitely worth looking at, but I have a little bit of an issue going into this. Number one, if you're carrying this stuff and it's a spear projectile, as you can see, you can end up throwing spears really fast. So if you get down to a point where all this stuff is kind of used up, it would be really handy to just have dedicated knives. And I know that you're talking about a nomadic or a semi-nomadic tribe that's moving around, and so weight means everything. Carrying a dedicated actual skinning knife really isn't much work, or isn't a lot of weight to carry, but the work that it saves you in the long run is going to be significant. Now, another really big fact of this is what we're trying to do with these tapers, whether it's on foreshafts or connected directly to spear shafts, is that these things are tapered more for penetration rather than a robust haft to use as knife work. So what's going to happen is if you actually have detachable foreshafts, which we'll talk about this again in another minute, then the haft on this is really thin, but we have a couple of these made up, and even some of these really small points used as knives as well. So this one's a little bit silly. It's almost a blend between the two, where you'd say, well, it could be a really thick foreshaft but a small point. So when you look at some of these artifacts from the kill sites from actual Clovis, which would be the Dumbo or the Kimswick site, they're using really small projectiles just like this. And so to say, well, these are knives, what we're going to do is we're going to hand these specifically to these guys that are now starting to get used to using some bigger blades. And you're going to see how does it work on a bison, a modern day bison, not a bison antiquus, which is pretty close, about twice the size of this, but then also on a mammoth, because remember, these Dumbo or Kimswick style of points were used on proboscideans, not bison. So you're talking about a point this size, and if you're saying, well, these are just knives, that's not an efficient knife. And we're going to see how these act, again, because the halves on foreshafts are not well built. They're not supported for knife work. So it's a great idea to say we can detach and use a foreshaft as a knife right up until that haft fails. And I think we're going to see that it fails pretty quick, because we actually need a pretty robust haft. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about with these inset foreshafts is anytime you have an inset foreshaft and it's got a lip around it, that's going to impede penetration. And that's really important for later archaic points where you're actually trying to use the foreshafts as the projectile, not just the stone point. So it goes in, it stops at the haft. So in this scenario, it would be like this. This one's a smoother, which we'll talk about that. But imagine there was a lip around this, a smaller one, which would look like this, right? See how there's a lip? It would go in, it would penetrate, it would stop. It's going to hit this hard transition. Might penetrate a little bit, but it's going to hop. And then as the bison runs or animal runs, it's going to pop out like that. This is going to drop away. We can pick up the spear, right? And then we can grab another foreshaft that we're carrying, stick it in and throw it. It's a great idea. Well, that's really good for archaic stuff. What we're running into here is if we're talking about big animals, bison antiquus, mammoths, mastodons, any of really the megafauna, even modern day bison, quite frankly, this isn't a lot of penetration, even if you extend these out. So what happens is you start extending these socket points out. Now it starts getting really wobbly, and this gets a really weak joint. So as soon as you hit it, that's the piece that collapses. So that's an issue. Now, this one being with cane, we can inset and actually run flush. So this is what I did on the first bison that I speared with the Dalton projectiles, is I made more flush mount, so I wasn't trying to stop. I was going for penetration, so we could penetrate up onto the cane, get maximum penetration. Well, then that defeats the purpose of replaceable foreshafts, because if you're up into an animal like this and it goes to break, it's going to break your main shaft. Now it's no longer reusable. So that's a big problem. The other big problem is, not considering this one because it's cane. Cane was probably not in wide distribution during the end of the Ice Age or the Younger Dryas, because of the cooler temps. That would have been pushed really far south. So if you were using hardwood, it would require long drills that you could drill a socket into hardwood, and those drills that are longer are absent. So in the Clovis assemblage, and what they have in replace of drills or pre-drill technology is like burinated points and perforators, and there's some there is a point from the there is a drill from the Jake's Bluff site, which is really a short drill, which is almost like an advanced perforator or burinated point, but it wouldn't be sufficiently long enough to drill out into hardwood, and you don't really see that come into play until after Clovis, especially into transitional paleo, so getting into Daltons, and then later early archaic like Baldwin points and stuff like that. That's when you start seeing, you know, these longer drills that are a few inches or several centimeters long, and they're meant for drilling down into. So what you see in the Clovis assemblages, they're not really using these socketed points that stick in. Not only is it horrible for penetration, but it's absent of the tool that is required to actually drill that out. But we're going to test the theory anyway, and we're going to let these guys use these floor shafts for skidding. And I think I want to make sure these guys behind me know when I hand these tools off, we're not intentionally trying to break them. We're just going to use them like we're using everything else. As we're going to run through some of the, because we're going to move into some of the gutting, and we'll remove a back strap, a chunk of meat out of there, work on some of this, but we're going to use these like the four shaft kind of technology. Again, these are not really well supported. These ones I used as knives, but they're really small blades. You're going to use these. We'll talk about all the stuff later. Use it. Hey, if it breaks, don't intentionally break it, but if this stuff breaks and you can't, you know, you're not going to hold it back here and use it. Hold it up.
Jim.
Okay. So if it breaks,
I got you.
just say it broke and then set it over there. We'll go over it later. So everybody just work with whatever they want to work with. Keep going on the process.
Yeah, I'm just clearing out the serrations, you know, and it'll cut, but and it's nice to have somewhat of a handle, but you still have to choke up so far, you know, on this thing.
Your initial assessment on it, do you prefer those?
Yeah, I'd rather have a hook and knife.
Okay, so like the hafted blade points.
Yeah, it doesn't gum up because it doesn't have serrations. Okay. But you have a handle, and once you're through the hair, it doesn't gum up at all.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it holds its edge pretty good as long as you stay off the bone.
Before I just
Probably
this.
right there.
I would. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd just walk it up as far as you can.
There you go.
Just like a.
Oh, it broke.
Ryan, can I have a knife yet?
Come back.
I think we're still connected.
Pull here, pull here, pull
Yep.
top here.
If you got a good half on one of these, they're not bad at all,
this.
man.
I hope that's all right.
All right, here you guys go. Now you got some unifacial tools and bifacial stuff. If you want to use them, do it. You're all supposed to jump.
I'm busy, man.
Okay.
We're getting ready to roll it too.
Well, you got one of the other side.
Well,
So you go ahead.
Yep.
And I'll start in.
I haven't used this one yet, but I want to. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Joe, you're not in the gut, man. You're not in.
That's what we're doing now. I bet mine is actually in the stomach contents.
yeah.
You'll help.
Get some of that.
These were Ryan's. Opposite one here. And then the other side, we should have.
Yeah.
Here's the feet. What's your feet? Is that the liver?
Good job.
That's
Coagulated blood.
Oh, just
You guys nailed that.
Here's that point, Ryan. Here's where that point come through. But you know, there's no. It could be mixed in. You see it right here.
Okay.
But it could be mixed in with.
You want a sandwich or anything?
Here's a lung injury. Cast of everything.
Yeah.
So
Not of this one.
Here's one lung hit at least.
Looking.
Yeah. Unless it pulled out and fell on the ground, it's possible. But
It's somewhere in this mess.
you can go through the mess later too.
Yeah.
So drag the mess off,
Or
and
nominate.
then we can thumb through that.
Nominate a guy to.
How's your hand?
Kristen, how bad do you want to dig through that? Find all your projectile points.
It's a big old heart.
Hold that back for me.
I tell you what, I'm so glad I got guys to help so much with this because I think correcting and getting all the data.
It's good. It's
Right here
iron.
too,
Gallbladder.
I did that. Is this the gallbladder?
Yeah. Look at it.
Joe's like, I'm good.
Any idea? Hey, any idea what spear that was?
No.
It's like completely full.
I don't know, man. Like this could really be Sam's, to be honest with you, as deep as it was and coming to this trajectory.
I don't think. I think it was one of the last ones that these guys put in on the.
I feel like my point is still in the stomach.
I think Sam's.
Here's
is
the
that.
wound.
That's
this
the
is
one.
so
That's
dense.
Sam's.
I think it stopped.
That's vegetation.
I think you want to dig around in that.
That's stomach vegetation for sure.
Why not?
Let's pull this out. That's just grass.
You want to just drag
That's
this
a
off?
huge
Hey, I went
stomach
through every
too,
bit
man.
of it on an elk.
Yeah.
I literally went through every bit of stomach contents, and everybody was like,
I did last
puking.
time.
I was like, I'm fine at this point, and I did.
We tried to get that obsidian one last time, and I think it just like, it was gone forever. Those are so small.
Move this.
So I'm gonna use my thumb to separate because inner loins are pretty soft.
Yeah.
Is it all?
And then here, I'll pull this back.
Right here.
Put your thumb right there and run it till it stops. Okay, and then follow that tissue. It's gonna be around here, that connective tissue. And then I'll pull this back, so you can use that tool or this tool whenever you want. Doesn't matter. And then on this side, we're gonna run. You'll probably have to cut a little bit of that. Actually, up into here. Okay, got that?
I wonder if they think there's something like mojo in it or something. You know what I mean? Like they think that there's.
I've never seen an exit though. Uh-oh. Yeah. Now she got big blood.
Boob blood. That's how it sounds, but I don't know if it wants boob blood.
Heck no.
And you could have pulled that. It could be in that pool of blood inside too. You never know.
And that, yep. And all that goodness right there.
Gut pile, man.
How many points are in this thing?
People's elbow.
That's a good question that I don't have an answer to.
Into that gut pile.
I think early people most likely left the rib meat because there's not a ton here. But I think grand scheme of things, if we follow that and we want to take that rib meat, I think the best thing to do is actually lip it like this and take it out a strip at a time. But if you look at this, it's crazy because there's so little meat here. And you'd think on a bison there would be it's almost paper thin. Y'all see? I mean, you can see all the holes here. But do you see how, like, my fingers here? Look at how thin there's just nothing there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I still want to cook it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, regardless. I still gotta cut them on my bandsaw and put them in my smoker.
That's it.
I think the overall best plan on that is to just rip the meat out in a strip. But it's up to you. It's like if somebody wants to take ribs and actually do that, then I say go for it. But that's what you're looking at right there. And that's the kind of stuff you hang over and you smoke and you dry that out. Little rib jerky kind of stuff. It's up to you guys how you want to handle that. I'll leave it up to you. Pick them clean because these aren't a scarcity on the plains or the tundra. They're out here. So especially if we're talking about, we have the luxury right now that we're not defending this.
Do this.
We're not defending this kill from lions and bears and all that kind of stuff. So if we're sitting here being bared down on with some big predators, this rib meat is not something you're that interested in overall.
Probably.
But I mean, we'll cut out whatever anybody wants on this thing, but when you see the ribs, if we punt the other side, you'll know why. There's not a lot there. The real meat's here. You take it, you go. We're gonna get on out. All right, also,
Scored it.
we're gonna start introducing the hafted knives as well, which may or may not be a later technology we're still looking at. You got a preform, right? Yeah, show that to a camera. So that's an unhafted Clovis preform. So it would be, and then this would be the difference maker of using these side by side. So since these two are so similar, once you're done using that one for a bit, switch to this one.
Okay.
We'll set this, so stick that in your pocket. I'll get the rabbit another one, and then you can tell me, oh, would you prefer to have a wood handle on it or not? And I think we already know the answer of that.
That's you.
Okay.
Yeah, the one over there I went to get, it was all hot. I don't know.
That one's sitting there with mine.
Let me get over there. Oh, you go for
I don't think that long. Maybe this is mine. It's full.
Yeah, that's you.
Fucking drink it.
I'm gonna trap it. I'm just gonna break shit. We're breaking shit.
There you go.
Alright, we'll set that right there. There it is.
Like it or maybe.
Right there.
Handles a little better, right?
I like the feel of it.
Hey Jason, what's
I
holding
didn't have a
that
great
on
grip
there?
on it. The sternum.
They score the.
So it's just like
the
next
next three.
you.
Do three.
Watch your fingers. I don't think I got this one over here.
What do you think? Do you like the idea of bringing the ribs back in sections and cooking them, or cutting the meat out, or leaving them?
No more?
At this point, dude, almost like a big hammer stone.
She's doing awesome, man.
You're in there, gnarly Carley. You got it.
I'm just backing Carley ain't no slouch either, man. She's getting in there.
That's right, dude. I like the handle.
She took your inside the buffalo thing, man. She's like, I'm cool with it.
I had it.
She's like, Joe can't have all the fun. I want to get in the buffalo.
Joe.
And then say, here, grab that piece.
Oh, you got the same blade, one hafted, one unhafted. The unhafted cuts about the same as far as the edge, but the handle gives me a mechanical advantage. So I can kind of get a little more pressure on the cut and get in there a little more accurately and cut stuff out. So really like the handle, definitely an improvement.
Carley finishes up that little piece. We're gonna flip this side, the bison, to do the other side. Now we've kind of run through the gamut on the different tools. I want everybody's going to be able to just choose whatever tool that they want. Now, a lot of the tools have been used, so anything that's they like, but it's got a depleted edge, we're going to sharpen that. And I'm going to probably sharpen some. Most people wouldn't know it to look at this at this point, but Carley's pretty proficient flint knapper, so she's going to be sharpening a lot. So now that we did one side is a lot of experimental stuff, the second side is going to be, now it's all about efficiency. We use whatever tool you want through the whole assemblage, and if it's got a depleted edge, say it needs sharpened, hand it to me, hand it to Carley. We're going to sharpen that edge, we're going to hand it back, and you guys are going to have this side knocked out in like, I bet you 30-40 minutes tops. And that's a really, really important piece to all of this. So just because we reface a tool now doesn't mean that you wouldn't take it out, throw it on the ground and say, okay, we're done with that one, and then take a whole new blade and inset that in that tomorrow, because next week we'll do this all over again. So remember that they have a little bit of time between kills. This is going to sustain some people for a little while.
Dude.
I'm good.
Just like totally.
All right, ready?
Wait, on 3, ready?
Yeah.
3.
Brian, 3.
Brian, you goose.
All right.
You goose.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Now we're gonna knock this one out quick.
Yeah.
Any tool you want. I don't care. Remember what tools you like. We're gonna talk about it later.
Just pay attention to that cut line from the spine down to the leg.
Yep.
So
same cut that you did.
Cut line.
Do the same thing here.
Sam, you're on it.
I don't care what you use on what. If it's dull, say I want it resharpened, and either Carley or I is going to resharpen it, okay? Site, rather than bring a whole, we might have a bag of blades that we bring, but if we were sitting, if people really do like the blade core stuff, I can carry one core with me as I go. So it'd be a piece of flint or chert or whatever, and you can see all these individual blades. Now we have a bin of blades I've already removed just to bring to keep this process rolling. But on site, rather than bring a whole, we might have a bag of blades that we bring, but if we were sitting here now, they like that hafted blade tool, and you got somebody over here working at the fire, they can soften the pitch, take a blade out. They might say, hey, I need a new blade. And then that's a really simple situation to where we're going to be able to take an antler or an ivory punch and kind of find a new platform on this. And I can pop a new blade off just like that. So this is a whole toolbox within itself. So that right there, here, somebody use that blade for something.
I'll take it.
So now that's the benefit of the blade core technology is as a blade gets depleted, yes, you can actually rework the edge if you like it, but that might be a saw. That might be what we have shown at a different time, where we're able to take our spear shafts and then we turn some of these exhausted blade edges that we just popped off that they're skinning with, and then chip the edge and use it as a saw to cut in notches for knife handles, or even cut antler to size where you just find a piece of antler, you cut it and break it off, score it all the way around. So these tools really get run to exhaustion, but those single edge blade tools are somewhat valuable, especially for simple initial incision flakes. And this whole new fresh broken edge is exactly what these guys are looking for when they're trying to cut through all this meat and bone. So now just like that, we've got a really sharp edge. I got one little spot right there.
And let's see if we can. Well, let's try to maybe.
Perfect. Here, Joe, take that one back and use it.
Got it.
And then let me know how that works.
Ryan,
show him quick.
you knock me off a flake so I can cut this meat.
Gotcha.
Oh, it's great. That's 1,000 times better.
I got him right here.
1,000 times better.
1,000 times better.
So once it really gets exhausted, we can do a really quick refacing of the tool and then move on. So having somebody that has the ability to just sit here and do nothing but refacing tools is invaluable. And then you got somebody else that's maybe over there by the fire. He might be cutting meat, or somebody else, just so we have something to kind of snack on while we're going, eating organs, any of that kind of stuff, eating liver, eating heart. And then you got somebody else popping out blades off of these pitch hafted or pitch glued single blade items, and so we can just continue the process. So having a lot of hands on deck really goes a long way to help. Like these guys here, I don't have to worry about what any of these guys are doing. They got a job, I got a job, he's got a job. Everybody just knows what they do, and we just do it. Oh yeah. Here, do that one first.
That one?
Yeah, whenever you do it, don't, obviously, I'm assuming you know that. Don't hold it by the blade.
Yep, give it support.
Yep, exactly. Just a single bevel, so don't flip it over, just one side and then do the other.
Okay, I mean, had I not jumped it and the guy don't fire like 50 times, you know, it would be fine, but
palmetto stalks make things.
Yeah. Yeah, what you need, sir? Get back on this. Yeah. They're finding these kill sites. They're finding, you know, blade tools, or they're going to be finding anything like this that just happen to roll off. Exactly, and nobody cares. They're just working. It's just a tool. You want to collect your tools.
You the woman.
Right in there. All right, so Jim, pass this tool off. That's get on there. Ability to just sit here and do nothing but refacing tools is invaluable. And then you got somebody else that's maybe over there by the fire. He might be cutting meat, or somebody else, just so we have something to. But I don't think.
Yep, I think we're done with the leg almost.
Which side is like over here? What if I just straddle the head?
Yep, that's exactly how that works. I've had these guys take their exhausted blades and put them on a pile because we're wanting to save them. But in the grand reality of things, if you have one that's kind of okay or not okay, this stuff, I mean, like here's the tool that we're still using here. This stuff we set over and we cheated, we put it on plastic, but it's going to get mixed in with these leaves. All it's going to take is somebody shuffling one time. And so when archaeologists come along later and find these kill sites, they're finding, you know, blade tools, or they're going to be finding anything like this that just happen to roll off. Exactly, and nobody cares. They're just working. It's a tool. You want to collect your tools, but it just doesn't always happen like that. And even with see, we got another good cut there. Even the projectile points that are in the thoracic cavity, and sometimes it's recovered, sometimes it's in that gut ball that's over there. And if you find them, good. You're going to rehaft them. You're going to sharpen them. You're going to use them again. And if not, the number one goal right now is to get this meat off. Whether we're fighting weather conditions, whether we're fighting heat, whether we're fighting predators, whatever the case is, the job is to get the meat done. These guys are getting tired, and as soon as this job is done, any points that are flakes that are scattered around here, I have a feeling everybody in this whole thing is going to be like, they're not looking for tools. So that's how you're going to start finding these tools that get left behind. You're trying to keep track of them all, but when you're using a tool, you're not done with it yet, and then all of a sudden stuff starts to slide like that. Boom, now it's gone. Guys are shuffling around, their feet are right here, and it's getting shoved up under stuff. That's what archaeologists are finding. It's the stuff that, it's not that they made it and we're like, I'm done, you know what I mean? It's like they were using these tools and then they lost them. That's what they're finding later on. It's not that they didn't want them. What do we got going on here? Here's something.
Found a point in the shoulder blade.
There you go. Found a point right there.
It's actually underneath the shoulder blade. So
no, that's not it. Awesome. So that was in that hit bone. That's a split shaft right there. Split haft. That's awesome.
There's another one.
There you go. He's collecting them all. What are y'all doing over here? Here we got points. Now I think that's Jason. That's Jason's right there. He was looking for that one.
Yep, that's it.
We'll set it aside. Just let me cast that one.
Yeah.
You have it. Yeah. You should have it.
But yep, that's it. So we're collecting stuff up, and it's not like right now I collect stuff up because I want to put all this in like a display case and be able to look at edge wear if I want to, or remember, you know, the whole experience. They weren't worried about that. They would find that exact piece, and man, I can't wait to show this one later.
I'll have a lot of footage
up close in the lab or in the shop, and we're going to show how rounded it is. And people find these projectiles and say, oh, that was used to, this thing was sharp. It was really sharp heading into this hunt. Now it actually looks like a standard Clovis with the rounded nose, the depleted edge. That was sharp with serrations before we ever started. And that is exactly why this right here is more important than doing any sort of static carcass test, throwing into the dead carcasses, or, you know, building a point and throwing it in the dirt and kicking it around. This would not have happened had you not jammed it into the shoulder of a bison and it been running and carrying it and just eating these serrations, breaking the tip off, hitting the bone. That right there, I have a feeling we'll be able to look at that, and there's going to be so many signatures from this point that are comparable to artifacts found from the Clovis complex.
That's my piece.
That's yours.
That's my.
You called it. That's your participation trophy.
That's right.
All right.
You got yours, right? I got mine. It's that knife. I'm putting it in my.
Can you get it off here yet, Tristan?
It's still connected underneath.
Oh yeah, dude.
All right, let's
Get mad about it.
Yeah, get mad.
There you go.
spin it.
You got it, man. You're there.
Here.
Yep, that was it. I heard it pop.
That's exactly it.
Yep.
Good. Okay. All right, so we used a whole bunch of different tools from the Clovis assemblage or the Clovis complex, or however you want to look at it, and then some that controversial ideas. We don't know for sure if they had it or not, but then the idea with the foreshaft, which we've explained some of the issues with that, but really kind of ran everything to ground, put a lot of time in on the first half of the bison, really told people what tools they had to use because I needed them to become proficient with using those tools. And then when we flipped the bison over, I let anybody use whatever they wanted, and then that really tells the story. And so everybody here really is comfortable with what's going on. So we're gonna just really briefly go around and talk about what tools they liked and what they didn't like, but we're gonna try to keep it really short because we don't have to do a deep dive on it. So pros, cons, next tool, pros, cons, next tool, pros, cons. We're gonna go down that list kind of with everybody and really try to keep it the whole thing at probably 20 seconds or less. Okay, we'll start with Jason, and we'll start the whole thing off. Basically, we'll go in this order so everybody already knows what we're talking about. And so we're going to go ahead and start with just the single unhafted blades driven straight off of a core.
All right, so first strike technology, you know, sharp flake. Pros, super sharp. Cons, very difficult not to cut yourself when you're trying to work at any given speed. Moving down, more refined edges here, biface versus you know, almost a full point or knife blade. Same. You got serrations here, so you have a cutting surface that lasts longer once you clean them out. But again, problems with potential cutting yourself while using them without a handle. This one here, the foreshaft with the hafted Clovis point, it's just a side-to-side strength problem when using it for cutting, which is the motion for cutting. It's not built for side-to-side, it's built for direct penetration. The hafted knife blade, certainly you know, one of my favorites, obviously, because it feels more comfortable. It feels more like something you would commonly use. Serrations, cuts fantastic, and easy to clean out and easy to resharpen. The hafted Hoka style knife, again, first strike technology, but then amplified through the use of the handle. Fantastic, absolutely love it. Great skinning, a lot of edge retention. The split shift just not stable enough to make it through any level of skinning. It becomes frustrating, and then you find yourself basically back in this situation very quickly.
Absolutely. And then these are going to be easy to replace blades, and that's something that we'll now that we are really comfortable with that tool as well, and a lot of people like that tool, we're going to make sure that somebody is, while they're running a fire, as edges get depleted, will knock new blades off or have new blades, and they'll automatically just be heating up the pitch, popping them out, putting new pitch in. Yep. It said that because that's a heat activated glue, it doesn't need to dry, it just simply cools. So set it in the shade, in 5 minutes it's ready to go. So we can have a cycle of those knives. If you're somebody dedicated, you don't have to stop skinning the bison to do it, but if you had a dedicated person that's A, sharpening knives, and B, replacing blades, very efficient system, especially between these two. They're the most secure without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Yep. I think that actually probably covered a lot, but I do want everybody to, I guess at this point now what we'll do is, instead of going through the full workup on it, tell me what your least favorite is, and then what is your full favorite. And if everybody, this is the least favorite, you can say least favorite because it's an unreliable system, and it just should be excluded. And then if you feel inclined to be like, but for like a real tool, what's your other least favorite, and then which is the one that, or two that you would choose, and just kind of go around that. And then that's going to be really well defined in this, and then that one's quick. So my least favorite's this because of this, my favorite tool is this because of this. And just by saying it that fast, we should be able to cut that, and within about 30 seconds of this film, cover all of it. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
So for me, it was all about controlling the tool and whether I could or not. So this one caused dangers with that popping out, so not a lot of control because it kept wanting to seesaw. This one was also hard to control. But as far as the one that I liked, definitely this one because it had the fine edge for skinning that the flake had, but I had the handle to control it with.
Okay. Tristan?
Yeah, so this one just, like Sam said, very, very unstable, slipping around in there, very dangerous as far as how sharp it is. This one is, very, if it's glued in there properly, it's very sturdy and very solid. And then this is by far my favorite just because it's a little more familiar and very, very good edge on it. So.
The rabbit?
Well, obviously this one is my least favorite because it did pivot and slice my finger. But the edge was sharp. I just did not prefer it because it wasn't very securely hafted. Whereas this one is my favorite. The hafting is very secure and the hand grip is very comfortable to hold. The double edge also really made it an easy job.
That's good. Buffalo Joe.
Okay. Initial incision, if it's not used up, you use up a lot of them, as we'll show later, in one animal. But joint disarticulation, like tendons, this is great if it's new. I use the biface mostly, but I was doing a lot of skinning, so I actually was torn between those two. I like the hafted knife. A point to mention is that we didn't break a single one. Last time I think we popped 4. Mm-hmm. I didn't get much in with the pinch blade. I think like maybe 5 seconds, and I went to one that's pitched in and I broke it. So probably had another, probably less than 2 minutes with a pitched in blade. But I see the benefit of the core technology, having somebody napping, like the benefit of having Carley there also for sharpening with the hafted knives as well. And her being able to do that and not break the haft was impressive. So yeah.
Having the,
I actually didn't like this one as much, but I also didn't spend much time with it. I broke it in like 2 minutes.
Right. I did quite a bit with that one, and I was surprised. I didn't think I would like it. I thought the edge would deplete too quickly, and I really found that as long as I didn't slam the bone with it, it worked good. So I wouldn't use it as the initial incision because it does deplete. I would use a single blade for that, but then use the haft for cutting through meat, taking hide off, any of that kind of stuff that it's not going to go through heavy abrasion. Right. Where I typically always choose the full hafted, like Clovis preform stage on that because it is very secure. And the way that we carve that out in the wood, unlike previous methods where you take a saw and you cut a V and you stick it in there. These are actually ground out to where there's a nice fitting socket that wraps around it.
This time.
And that's why they're
definitely
deeper.
Right.
So they're much more secure. And it's actually, that's a case where doing this with stone tools, making the tools with stone tools actually shows that you can't just cheat it and cut a notch. You have to grind the notch and cut the notch out. Therefore, it fits a lot more snug because you're not taking more than you need out.
Right. You also have more pitch, literally more adhesive further up the point and more support with
so
the
they're very secure. And then that's a great way that you start taking with these preforms, these Clovis preforms, starting off as the blades, and then as you remove blades off that core, you start to, now you're left with really like a unifacial piece, but then as you continue to take flakes or sharpen it, it starts turning into a bifacial piece. Then with the intent to one day use it as a projectile, the preform can be fluted. I don't think it needs to be fluted just to use as a knife, but the idea is that if we flute it, and then now that it's looking like this, where it's got some early fluting, and maybe it does get fluted later, it can be hafted and then used as a knife until it's been sharpened down enough, and then again it is once again refaced, resharpened, and then possibly even further fluted or fluted.
You're potentially looking at the same tool.
It's just different progression.
Different sizes, right? But we're looking at essentially the same tool.
Having used
even from this to this. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the same. That's
we're just looking at the progression.
As it starts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, having used this exclusively quite a bit, obviously I've used this a lot. This style, using this knife style, I skinned 3/4 of the bison with this. And what I found, what I liked is once we were inside, this gums up inside. It does. This does not at all. So I found this to be. And it's so clean when you're pulling the hide away, thinking of hide preservation and not cutting through the hide. And like you were talking about, it mimics that going through the tendon, but it gives you a handle to get through it.
Right, and you're safer because you're not going to slip and cut yourself.
Exactly. So that's why this one is truly my favorite.
I was very surprised at how
because you spend less time cleaning out grooves or even resharpening. And then if you pair that with somebody that, potentially off to the side, knocking off flakes and re-gluing, I mean, this is like, as far as you could carry this in your belt, and then you would use this for something.
That's at a great point too is that the hafted preform still is a wonderful skinning tool, but it's going to excel when it comes to cutting the wood to make tools to cut spears.
Exactly.
So you're going to carry this. I can tell you right now that you're not going to walk out with a blade tool to cut down a tree because that edge won't work. Now next thing you know, you're chopping and it breaks, depletes the edge, where you can saw with the hafted handle. And it's a lot more efficient than having a piece held by the hand, where likewise, if they did use some sort of 4-shaft detachable, you're not going to pull your points off and go sawing trees down with them. Not only is it not stable, but you're dulling the edge of something that you're trying to kill an animal with. And you really don't want to go through this whole process of now we've went and speared an animal with this. Anybody that's got 4 shafts left, okay, cool, now we're going to skin them with these, because now you're already putting more work, you're depleting your next supply of spear
the concept of
much easier to just carry these other knives along with you, one of each, whatever you like.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's not one
of these
size
and one
fits all. It's that this guy became this guy, became this guy, became this guy.
But it's nice to have this in your bag, and you just knock a flake off, hold it over the fire, stick a new flake in, and you're back in business. And you don't have to resharpen this. You don't have to, because you don't resharpen this. You pop it out, pop it in. Okay. That is a first strike tool. Whereas you need other stuff to sharpen that.
A benefit to this with the shape and the skinning, I liked. It felt really good. I think you found that too. Really good in the hand.
I did see that with that particular one with just the one side sharpened.
It has to be right.
Then we saw we were using it as a hand axe against ribs.
There's definitely great levels. There's great ones and there's ones that were awful. Right. Absolutely. And as soon as you pick it up. But then an advantage here is that if Carley is resharpening, it's simple. It can become something else later. It is more mass to carry, but you could potentially get more work out of it. The shape is nice, and one thing I would say, as she's resharpening, you don't have to worry about breaking a haft.
Yeah.
But this is superior because of leverage and reach.
Right. All right.
That's why this wins out.
All right. So final answer on this. I don't care who grabs what. Anything that you hate, get rid of it. Actually, no, put it this way, close away from the camera. If you hate it, move it over here. If you would like it and you would use it again, slide it over there. Okay, so that tells the story. So this stuff here, nobody want. We do this again next time. You don't want any of this. Nope, I agree. Totally agree. I think individual blades
would make
are
this and bring it with me.
important.
Yeah,
the individual blades are important.
Right.
So we'll
Yeah,
slide that over.
for initial
Well, not only that,
incision.
but that's getting glued into here. So it's
Right.
paired,
Later,
it's paired
yes.
well.
It's the same tool, just a different
tool.
progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know, because that's one of those ones that we love to show people, because this has been really, thought about and romanticized a lot. Detachees use them as knives.
Yeah.
Everybody here hates it.
We broke it.
Everybody.
We
put it into practice real time, and we saw its deficiencies quite quickly.
Yeah, right. Much better tools. Could you do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you could.
You have to choke up so far on it that you put yourself in a situation where you're cutting yourself.
I mean, if that's the point, you can also do the entire thing with this.
Definitely.
But why would you?
One final one actually here that I've got. This is an important thing. I'm glad to bring that back up. So one final tool that we didn't really talk about, but we look at these very small points, like from the Kimswick or the Dumbo Proboscidean sites. Okay, and people have thought maybe those are just knives and they're not projectiles. Okay, I look at that and I say absolutely it's a projectile. It's not a good. And whoever used that, again, would you rather have one of those tools, or would you pick that tool up and use that to skin not only a bison, but an elephant? Is there anybody here that says, I absolutely want to use that? Why not?
Well, if that's the only thing that was laying there, that'd be the only reason.
That's it.
Right.
And then I'd probably just knock a...
But if you wanted to put that on the end of a spear and throw it into one,
Right.
does anybody want to put that on their spear and throw it at one?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's where it belongs.
Yeah.
On the end of the spear.
The only way to learn all of this stuff is what? Hunt them and butcher them.
Hunt them and butcher them.
If you're not
experiments,
hunting,
live
you're missing it all.
experiments.
Yep. And then trying to work through an animal proficiently. Not trying to just force an idea that works, but look at them all, put them in real time and use them.
Yeah.
I think we ironed out a lot. We had a couple surprising.
And you're putting these tools in capable hands. You're putting these tools in people's hands that know what they're doing.
Right.
They know how to disarticulate an animal. They know how to skin. They know what edge retention should look like. They know how to nap. They're familiar with the process of all this. So you're not just sticking it, giving it to somebody that doesn't know how to use it, and then they give you an answer that's really not relevant.
Right. We've all used stone tools proficiently in the past. It's nobody's first time using a stone tool.
Absolutely.
Right.
Excellent, guys. Thank you. So thanks to Hollywood and other poorly done documentaries, a lot of times when people think Clovis, they think scantily clad cavemen barely trudging across the ice desert in pursuit of survival somewhere else. And really what we're seeing is that couldn't be further from the truth. One of the big pieces of technology that Clovis people had was the eyed needle. And as we know, we're talking about Pleistocene people, even if they were migrating, not just hunting, but even migrating earlier than Clovis, those people would have been coming through in very, very cold Pleistocene temperatures and certainly would have had very sophisticated clothing. And with sophisticated clothing also comes very sophisticated hunting implements and other toolage. And one of the things also associated with these very primitive cavemen, which is quite funny also because Clovis people really didn't live in caves, but in those same depictions of these scantily clad cavemen, they're also carrying very robust and rudimentary spears, and they think that they're running up to mammoths and jabbing them with them, and really, that is not what the archaeological record shows. And the reason we're really confident that they're not running up to megafauna just simply stabbing or throwing these like javelins is because these are not the points or the blades associated with megafauna archaeological sites. What they're typically finding are these very, very small projectiles, which we'll talk a lot more about as we work through this documentary, but these are certainly not well suited to either butchering animals or attaching to these big, giant thrusting spears. So what good would these little points do put on these great big thrusting spear handles? Well, they weren't using thrusting spears to take down the megafauna, or bison for that matter, they would have brought with them the atlatl. The atlatl uses mechanical leverage, adds an extra joint into the arm, and then also the leverage of the atlatl or the thrower component to impose significant velocity onto the spear shaft. And the spear shafts can then become smaller using velocity rather than mass, allowing them to fly significantly further and also faster, and also on a much thinner shaft, much like this, which decreases friction, kinetic friction, which is needed to penetrate very large animals. So if we look at some of the casts of the very earliest people that were in North America 15,500, 16,000 years ago, this is a cast from the Freakin site in Texas, and then this isn't a cast, but this is a reproduction, the cast is behind me, a reproduction of the Dumbo mammoth kill site. And if you look at the size of these projectiles that are being found, they're very small, but they fit perfectly onto our atlatl thrown spear shafts meant for deep penetration. And the atlatl is so old that nobody can truly put a date to it. Some experts say it's as young as 20,000 years old, and some say as old as 40, perhaps even 100,000 years old. The use of this weapon and hunting implement system has absolutely been used extensively worldwide in all the human inhabited continents, and used extensively to hunt everything from the size of rabbits on up to mammoths. So here at Hunt Primitive, we've done a phenomenal amount of research and also hands-on building, hunting, and processing and work with the Clovis assemblage, the Clovis toolkit. And we could quite literally stretch this documentary out to probably be 5 or 6 hours long because of all the information that we would love to share with you, but we still have to try to condense that down as much as possible. But we have some really important notes that point to some other researchers' work and other people's ability in building that we want to make sure that we touch on, because they have very valuable information about different facets of Clovis and Clovis age life. One of the first pieces in which I will be able to include in some of the companion files to this documentary is the research done by Dr. Christopher Moore. And he's got a phenomenal lecture on a possible impact, a comet or asteroid impact during the time of the end of the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas, over the Greenland ice sheet. And this raises a lot of questions and also does plausibly answer the reason for the loss of a lot of coastal artifacts, as well as what looks to be a significant decrease in human population at the same time as the extinction of the megafauna. So I highly recommend that you check out that lecture that will be in the companion files, because it's really compelling research and data with platinum anomalies, iron sphericals, and the other things that kind of go along with an asteroid or comet impact that are absent below and above the Younger Dryas boundary line. And that also explains why when they look at these chert quarries, the places that the Clovis people were mining their rock resources to make the tools and knife blades and blade core technology, there is a significant decrease in quarry activity at the time of the Younger Dryas, and then it slowly starts to come back until a couple thousand years later during Dalton culture, when it explodes again. So they went through a massive devastation somehow, either with an impact or other climate catastrophe, and then were depleted significantly in population, slowly climbed back until populations came that people could work together, and then the population exploded again. And one of the other pieces that was really important that I took from Dr. Christopher Moore's lecture was his research in talking about the blood residue analysis being done on projectile points. And that is known as crossover immunoelectrophoresis, and that's not checking for DNA on the points, it's using the crossover proteins from live animals and then comparing that to blood residue, not like blood stains on the outside of the point, but say like blood that will have slid underneath some of these micro fractures in the stone and have been preserved that long, where they can test that against, say, like a modern day bison, and then ancient bison will pop positive on that. Same thing with modern day rabbit would pop positive, modern day cats would pop positive, deer, all of that kind of stuff. Same, of course, with elephants. And throughout, not only in his research of submitting points to be tested, but then also looking at other tests being done across the continent, they're really finding everything that people were hunting, including camels and horses and mammoths and mastodons. The bison was without a doubt the #1 animal that Clovis people were hunting. And that's also a clue as well, because some of the later people like Folsom and Midland are almost exclusively associated with bison kills. So this process of being able to look at these projectiles and testing for these blood proteins gives us a little bit of a hint of what they were hunting, or at least butchering, or even sometimes the proteins from the hafting material may have been found as well under those microfractures. But either way, they're in contact and in association with a lot of these different animals. And as I stated previously, it seems to be the #1 protein that they're finding is bison. One of the other really important things about the blood residue analysis is they're finding a lot of proteins from big cats and also bears. And some may suggest, well, maybe they're actually going and hunting big cats and bears. And that is plausible per se, especially if they're hunting with the aid of dogs, because they most likely also brought dogs with them when they migrated to the Americas as well. And while they may actually be hunting cats and bears with dogs, I think that it actually brings together a much better point that they're either scavenging some off of big predator kill sites, so they're either killing the bears or the cats that had the kill, or they are defending their kills from the bears and the cats that are coming to take it from them. So much like if we watch a documentary on the African savannah where the lions will come make a kill and then the hyenas, they want to come take it from them. Or if a leopard makes a kill, then a pride of lions wants to come take it from them. I think we would be seeing the same sort of scenarios playing out on the Mammoth Steppe or on the tundra in North America during the end of the Pleistocene, whether animals have kill sites and humans are trying to take that from them, or vice versa, where the humans have bison kill sites or megafauna kill sites and the cats and bears are taking it from them. And so that may potentially be where the idea of those big thrusting spears comes in as a force protection tool rather than a hunting implement, a last line of defense against these giant predators coming to take your kill, or even your scavenge kill for that matter. However, I believe the first line of defense would be you would have multiple hunters and multiple processors, and the hunters would likely turn into protectors of the kill once others came in to process the kill. And so rather than allowing bears or cats to get that close, again, we're going to use the atlatl, which gives us significant not only velocity, but range in how far we can deliver projectiles. So it's a huge advancement not only in hunting, but also in defense against large predators. So I know if we were down butchering a bison and we had giant short-faced bear, saber-toothed cat, or American lions that were circling us or walking back and forth, rather than building, just building some fires and holding up spears and hoping they don't get us. I think the hunters are going to be taking their spears, and as these animals are walking by, they're trying to kill them. They're not trying to run them off, they're trying to kill them. And then of course when they kill them, they have those resources as well. Those animal hides are going to be different than the mammoth or the bison that they're using. Some of those resources are going to be significantly better for different toolage than just the animal they killed. And so it stands to reason that instead of just protecting, you're actively aggressing, trying to kill cats and bears either off of their kill site or protecting your kill site from them. And then that explains again why there's quite a bit of blood residue from big cat and also bears found on tools from the Clovis assemblage. So behind me here on the whiteboard is just kind of a spider webbing of the variances in the evolution of certain projectiles. Now the map that's behind me here that we're going to show you, it's not the direct roadmap of how the evolution of all this works. This is just a visual aid, more or less. So kind of take this one with a grain of salt, but it does show, much like a family tree, how when you start with one particular projectile type, and then you start diverging groups, that now all of a sudden manufacture techniques change slightly because stone quarries and properties change slightly. And just like a game of telephone that you may have played in elementary school where one person whispers something to somebody else, by the time it goes around the entire classroom through how many people, or in this case perhaps generations, what is said at the end of the game of the telephone is going to be vastly different than what the original person initially passed on to the first person. And that's really no different than when we're starting with Clovis, and as the people start to spread out, but they're still taking the technology with them in different directions, working with different rock sources, working with sometimes different knapping tools, developing their own techniques, different techniques of indirect percussion. Now we're going to start seeing differences in Clovis, which is very apparent. We're only talking about Clovis being around for a few hundred years as it is. It's not a huge span of time frame. It was a very long time ago, but it wasn't a very long period of time. Clovis was rather short overall, 300 years. Sometimes it's debated that it's as little as 200, sometimes as much as 500, just kind of depending on how you want to classify some of these different fluted points. But the initial Clovis technology with these fluted points is already spreading out to where you have Western Clovis and Eastern Clovis and then a Midwestern Clovis as they come together. And as time continues on, you start seeing even more splitting off of groups where now you have something like Folsom that starts to come into play, and then Folsom works at the same time with Midlands that are non-fluted Folsom type points. Then you have a totally other Clovis group that's not even connected with the people in the West that is making Cumberland points, which are really crazy points altogether. And then you have other ones that stop fluting altogether, some that are starting to move into different Dalton cultures, or even the earlier to that, the Redstones, but that's the same thing. And it doesn't seem to matter how they diverge. Every time there's a certain split to this, right? So then you go from Clovis to what some would even call redstone then, and then that's controversial because now you have multiple types of redstone, because the redstone is immediately post-Clovis, so you've already had several splittings off of Clovis where people are making some Clovis differently. Then immediately post-Clovis, the fluted points they're making, they start referring to as redstones. Well, now you have multiple different redstone points. Those are splitting off. That could run over into the Folsom type stuff that could then go into the Cumberlands, that could go into non-fluted stuff like even further in the southeast where it gets into stuff like Simpsons or the later Swanee points, even around Tennessee with the quads. And then you start cracking into the transitional paleo stuff like Dalton's, where some of them are fluted and some of them aren't. So this picture, all this really does is just show how there's a constant evolution, just like the game of telephone, but instead of it just being in one classroom that you're saying a game of telephone, now imagine if you said the same thing to 10 or 15 different classes, and then they said it, and by the time they got done, they passed it down to the next grade below them, and then they told all those kids. Can you imagine how different the story would be by the time you ran down from, say, 5th grade down to kindergarten? None of the stories would be anywhere similar as to the first one that was ever given. And in this scenario, that very first story is what we're saying, Clovis. So by the time you get to Archaic period, several thousand years later, everybody has spiderwebbed off, and they have started making their own projectiles based on different tools, different materials, different technology, different needs in the animals that they were hunting. So in a couple final thoughts about Clovis, been a very fun project, and I'm glad that Hunt Primitive was able to take part and recreate and hunt and butcher and research and do so much work with Clovis that so many people are fascinated with. My thoughts really on the Clovis are as follows. I think it just happened to be the point type that was being used at the Younger Dryas, some sort of catastrophe and impact or climate change in one way or another, and also at the same time as the extinction of the proboscideans, the mammoths, the mastodons, and even the other megafauna. Even though there aren't a tremendous amount of sites showing that people were killing and eating these megafauna species, not just mammoths and mastodons, but giant sloths as well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't, because this is such a long time ago that, of course, very few of these bones would even be preserved. So the fact that we have as many as we do is really amazing within itself. But I don't think Clovis is the height, is the best of primitive hunting as has been thought previously. They think, well, because that fluting maybe has a very high threshold for failure, that they obviously knew what they were doing, so they built that specifically to be megafauna killing implements. And that may be true to some extent, but I don't believe that it was the height of flint knapping or primitive hunting. I think it was more of a cultural fad, if anything, that this came into popularity probably more likely for easier hafting and for thinner hafting on those transitions that we've shown you earlier, because those smooth transitions really tapered steeply allow for much better penetration into very thick woolly hair and hide. So I really think that the fluting was nothing more than a hafting aid. And it wasn't used previously, but then it was an advancement. And then even when it was used post-Clovis and after the megafauna, it was still used for 1,000 or so years, even into some of the Dalton points had flutes. Maybe one side was fluted and the other side wasn't. But after the transitional paleo stage, really the fluting just disappears, and it's not because the people weren't skilled. You actually start seeing that the flake scars on the bifacial lateral flakes start to be significantly better than those found in the Clovis tools. So they're simply getting better at thinning their bifaces, and therefore no longer really need the fluted technology to be able to make thin, streamlined points for penetration. So if you ask me as a professional primitive builder and hunter, what do I think about Clovis? I don't think that there's inherently anything wrong about it. I think the Clovis fluting is really just to aid in a much smoother transition to benefit penetrating of proboscideans, very woolly and very thick hides of woolly mammoths, and even the thicker hides of the larger Columbian mammoths, and then the mastodons, because penetration's really the name of the game, as opposed to laceration, which we start seeing at a much later archaic time. So I don't necessarily think that Clovis was the height of flint knapping and primitive hunting technology. I think it was it did have a utilitarian base, but I think it was also very cultural the way that it was done, and I think it was effective for doing that job, even though the job could be done with other tools. I think it fit exactly where it needed to fit, and that's also one of the reasons that it fell out of favor and then was not used in later point typology. One of the quick points I would like to bring up about the potential more rounded distal ends, the leading ends of projectiles in the Paleo time being slightly more rounded than we see especially in archaic time. So in my previous studies of working with bow and arrow technology, we find that very steep, sharp tip geometry is exceptionally important for penetration, especially on a lighter projectile like an arrow, but with the atlatl and the spear that is much heavier, carrying more momentum, it is important to have that very sharp tip if we're talking about pure penetration, but we can get away with having a little bit more rounded of a tip, as seen in a lot of paleo points, especially if the points are much smaller, because we're decreasing friction. But the purpose really that I found of the more rounded point is that it's less likely to snap that little needle point off in the event of a miss. But more importantly, we found that when you're carrying multiple spears, and especially if you're running, those longer spears, unlike arrows that are much shorter and they don't have a lot of rattle, you can carry a handful of arrows and they don't bounce and oscillate. When you hold a handful of spears, they're significantly longer, and as you're running, they tend to bounce. And that bouncing, as those needle tips bounce together, they can snap off, and then you go to throw, and now you essentially have a blunt-ended projectile point as opposed to that needle sharp tip. So the way to avoid that in Paleolithic times would be to make projectiles with slightly more rounded distal ends as opposed to the needle sharp tips. Even though you really want that penetration, you're going to be able to sharpen those tips a little bit, especially like you would see in the Kimswick or the Dumbo points, but they're not going to be those perfect needle tips that are going to get easily broken off if your points happen to clack together while you're running. So here at Hunt Primitive, we do a lot of building and hunting, and then also a tremendous amount of research. And not just me, but also the other members of the Hunt Primitive Tribe that goes out even far beyond what you see in this documentary. And so it's because that we all come together and work together and then share our own areas of expertise that we're able to bring as much good information and data as possible. And so really a lot of this wouldn't be possible without a lot of those other people that don't really get seen in this documentary. So I'd really like to give a big shout out, thank you to Scott Mitchell of the Silver River Museum for opening the doors of the museum, helping with his expertise and helping us with a lot of the questions that we've had throughout this. Also Dr. Joe Gingrich, who's been a great help as well at giving some very good statistical data or measurements on some certain things that we're looking for. Dr. Christopher Moore, his lecture has been really important in many facets of this documentary. And even on the toolage side, which is stuff that we really specialize in here at Hunt Primitive, not one person can know everything. And so we were able to reach out to Marty Reuter at Flint Knapping Tips, who really specializes in making very specific styles of points, especially Clovis, with the natural sources of rock being used and the tools used to recreate them, where his real passion is looking at flake scars and trying to completely recreate some artifacts, not necessarily recreating the artifacts, but making the points with different tools and then comparing those with the artifacts being found to sort of dissect how some of these flakes were removed with different tools and rock sources available to people in that area in that time frame. And Dr. Waters of Texas A&M University, who's always been available to answer questions or send me links to papers or help out by sending casts or something that I might need for a project. And then also working with me on his own projects to where now we're able to actually share data back and forth. So with everybody working together, it's really just been a great community effort to be able to put something like this on. And of course, I'm sure that there's more people yet involved on the academic side and even on the toolage side that I probably haven't covered. But, you know, really important to mention that it is a huge team effort here at Hunt Primitive outside of our normal hunter, builder, and butcher teams as well. So it really is a community that pulls all of this together.